Even him, whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish. Because they received not the love of the truth, that they might be saved.
Since 1815 there has been a continual assault on America by the Jesuits to try to destroy the fabric of this great nation. The famous inventor of the Morse code, Samuel B. Morse, also wrote of this sinister plot of the Jesuits against the United States. For over 200 years, the objective of the Jesuits has been the complete destruction of the United States Constitution. In the religious arena, the goal of the Jesuits is to wipe out any trace of Protestantism and other religions, author Bill Hughes. Early alarms were raised by prominent figures in American history, namely the second President of the United States John Quincy Adams. My history of the Jesuits is not eloquently written, but it is supported by unquestionable authorities, and is very particular and very horrible. If ever there was a body of men who merited eternal damnation on earth and in hell, it is this society of the Jesuits. There was no disguise they, the Jesuits, could not assume, and therefore, there was no place into which they could not penetrate. They could enter unheard the closet of the monarch, or the cabinet of the statesman. They could sit unseen in convocation or general assembly, and mingle unsuspected in the deliberations and debates. There was no tongue they could not speak, and no creed they could not profess, and thus there was no people among whom they might not sojourn, and no church whose membership they might not enter and whose functions they might not discharge.
We have to win this election, most important election ever, most important election ever, most important election ever. And again, Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed, it'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian.
In terms of religion, the smallest religious population today is called Zoroastrianism, having only 205,000 adherents, making it the smallest. Thus, the Jesuits having under 20,000 would qualify them as being a small people, by which this figure became strong.
I am the chosen one.
There's a Bible out now that includes the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Isn't that wonderful? It's a ploy. Are you kidding me? Some of you are so encouraged by that. The gospel is not an American gospel. It is the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ.
I will be the greatest jobs president that God ever created. I tell you that. America's future will be bigger, better, bolder, richer, safer, and stronger than it has ever been before.
And there is no question that there will be a challenge, the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, but also there will be a surprise outbreak.
These great beasts, which are 4, are 4 kings, which shall arise out of the earth. Daniel 7:17 KJV. The Jamieson Fausset and Brown Bible Commentary notes that each of the 4 kings represents a empire, dynasty or government, not to be mistaken for a kingdom. Here it's called a dynasty, that of Nebuchadnezzar, Alexander, Antiochus, and Antichrist. The biblical illustrator further supports these findings, as do many of his contemporaries, stating that it is a matter of undeniable and immutable fact that the empire of Babylonian Chaldeans, namely Nebuchadnezzar, was succeeded by those of Medo-Persia, namely King Cyrus, then the Greek Empire corresponding to Alexander the Great, which leaves us with the subject of our focus, the 4th and last kingdom upon the earth. The 4th beast shall be the 4th kingdom upon the earth. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. It appears that the best commentaries past and present are in agreement that the 10 horns signify 10 governments, empires or dynasties, not to be confused with kingdoms, as there are only 4 kingdoms, but rather the 10 horns signify governments or empires such as the United States government, for instance. Theologian Albert Barn notes that all the horns, which are governments, empires or dynasties, manifestly springing from the one kingdom, which is the beast. Here, for instance, theologian Adam Clarke lists the 10 horns, which are governments, empires or dynasties, within the 4th kingdom leading up to the final appearance of the last government or empire, which in this case would make the 11th, since 10 came before it. However, it is widely recognized, for good reason I reckon, that Spanish conquistadors defeated 3 empires, namely the Mayans, Aztecs, and Incan empires in the 16th century, wherein America was in its infancy, thus, a little horn, government or empire. It's also interesting to note that the Mayans, Aztecs and Incas are commonly described as having been subdued. And he shall subdue 3 kings. And of the 10 horns, governments, empires or dynasties, that were in his head, namely, the kingdom, which is the beast, and of the other which came up, the other horn, which is a government or empire, and before whom 3 fell, the Mayans, the Incas and the Aztecs, even of that horn, government, empire or dynasty, that had eyes, and a mouth that spake very great things. We are encouraged that in this up and coming horn, government, empire or dynasty, that a man is present, a man is evidenced by eyes and a mouth speaking great things, in this government or empire, that is, even of that horn, government or empire, that had eyes, and a mouth that spake very great things, suggestive of a man, whose look was more stout than his fellows. This suggests a man, a person's physical appearance. Notice that this is the culmination of all things, the very end. This is determined by the following verses, which permit us to take a look at Revelation for direct relationships. Since Revelation is the end, as is being described in Daniel, here are a few telling cross-references. Daniel reads,
In this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, and the judgment was set, and the books were opened. Daniel 7, 8-10. The book of Revelation reads, And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them, and I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus, and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads, or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. More relationships are found between Daniel, indicating that they are indeed describing the same vision. Revelation 13, 2 KJV, the beast, which is a kingdom, which I saw was like unto a leopard, the symbol interpreted to be that of the Macedonian king, Alexander the Great, as seen here in Daniel. And his feet were as the feet of a bear, corresponding to the Medo-Persia Empire under King Cyrus, as seen here in Daniel. And his mouth as the mouth of a lion, identifying with Babylon, the Chaldeans specifically, also seen here in Daniel. And the dragon gave him his power, and his seat, and great authority. But who is him who is given a seat by the dragon? The man. Revelation 13, 5 KJV, and there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months, or 3.5 years. Daniel 7:25, 27 KJV, and he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time, also known as 3.5 years, with a time equaling 1 year, and times equaling 2 years, and half a time equaling half a year. Thus, 3.5 years.
Not only is a time, and times, and the dividing of time, the same as 42 months, as previously seen in the book of Revelation, but the book of Revelation is evidently describing the fellow that Daniel is describing, and vice versa, the fellow that is present in the last horn, which is a government. Daniel's vision appears to invoke the book of Revelation, namely, the very end of all things is, after the 3.5 years, or 42 months appointed to the stout fellow present in the little horn. The book of Daniel reads, "But the judgment shall sit," the judgment referenced in Revelation, "and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and to destroy it unto the end. And the kingdom and dominion, and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven, shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him."
Revelation 17:10-11 KJV, and there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come, and when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was, and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. If there are only 4 kingdoms, then the 7 kings wouldn't be 7 kingdoms, but will be 7 individuals. In 1984, President Ronald Reagan and Pope John Paul II formally established diplomatic relations between the United States and the Vatican, ending a 117-year hiatus.
With the Roman Catholic Church still being the central theme.
These facts leave us with the following order. Number 1 Ronald Reagan. Number 2 Bill Clinton. Number 3 George Bush Sr. Number 4 George Bush Jr. Number 5 Obama. Number 6 Trump. Number 7 Biden. If the 8th and last king is of the 7 kings, number 8 would be Trump. The king who is in the vision would be President Biden, who continues for a short space, presumably meaning that he is a one-term president as opposed to serving out a full 2 terms. The 8th king is evidently called the beast that was, and is not. Even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, as demonstrated, and goeth into perdition.
There have always been suggestions that the Antichrist will be of Assyrian lineage. Based on the following 2 scriptures in Isaiah, they are as follows. Isaiah 10:5 KJV. O Assyrian, the rod of mine anger, and the staff in their hand is mine indignation. Isaiah 10:24 KJV. Therefore thus saith the Lord God of hosts, O my people that dwellest in Zion, be not afraid of the Assyrian, he shall smite thee with a rod, and shall lift up his staff against thee, after the manner of Egypt. Validating this suggestion is the following fact. Trump has German lineage. There is historical evidence that the Germans are descendants of the Assyrians, despite the effort to discredit it. It reads, "The notion that Germans descend from Assyrians is a pseudo-historical idea. Notice that it is conceded as being a historical idea, just pseudo. One thing's for certain, this world will always attempt to discredit things of the spirit, and nobody understands these things as well as the Jesuits. If there was no evidence whatsoever, that's another story, but that's not the case.
Christians, get out and vote!
It's significant to note that no group of people are this keen to the knowledge and understanding that America was founded as a Protestant nation. Most people are entirely disinterested to this historical truth, or in some form of another dismiss it, but not the Jesuits.
Christians, get out and vote!
My beautiful Christians, I love you, Christians.
I'm not Christian. I love you.
Interpretation number 2. The second interpretation implicates the woman, which is similarly called the harlot in the book of Revelation. This harlot, identifying with a rogue church, since a woman signifies a church in prophecy, the same woman described here, which historically identifies the Roman Catholic Church. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints, and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. This woman, seen again here in the book of Revelation, sits upon the beast. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Since the beast would be the fourth and last kingdom, which evidently began with the Roman Senate, then this rogue church has to be present during the rise of the little horn, as the little horn is the last government within this fourth kingdom. In other words, the little horn is a part of the beast upon which the harlot rides. In biblical eschatology, a prophetic year or prophetical year is regarded as being different from an ordinary year, namely, a 360-day period of time, thus, until a time, and times, and the dividing of time, in prophetic language amounts to
not just 3.5 years as earlier established but
1,260 years. Contrary to popular belief, Pepin the Short was the first recorded crowning of a civil ruler by a pope, not Charlemagne. Pepin was able to secure several cities which then gave to the pope, and what is known as the donation of Pepin, whereby the papal states were established, and the temporal reign of the papacy officially began, namely 755 AD. A date early determined by theologian Adam Clarke. This is very significant because the title of emperor is applied only after being crowned by the Pope. The last emperor to be crowned by the Pope was Charles V in 1530. However, contrary to what academia is teaching us, Emperor Charlemagne, who was the son of Pepin, would not have been the first emperor, as that designation belongs to his father, who was first crowned, wherefore at the very least, Charlemagne inherited the title from his father. But who is behind the manifest misdirection that authoritatively asserts Charlemagne as the first emperor, and why? By 1599, the Jesuits had had enough experience in education to try to codify their methods and ideals, and they did so by producing the famous Ratio Studiorum, or Plan of Studies. By 1773, the number of academic institutions had grown to over 800,
while they of course retained their religious objectives.
The publication goes on to postulate about what could possibly be their motivation in establishing thousands of schools across the earth. What did we the Jesuits hope to accomplish by these schools? Why did we do it? Of course they fortuitously provide the answer in their musings, stating that
it is often said that in them, the Jesuits wanted to oppose Protestantism.
Nevertheless, the Jesuits codified methods and ideals in the education system, to deliberately misdirect attention to Charlemagne so that one would not arrive at the date of 755 AD.
Indeed, Pope Stephen confirmed Pepin as king by holy anointing, and with him he anointed as kings his 2 sons.
But, why is that date important?
Because 1,260 years from when the opposition was given the state and secular authority to persecute the Church, is 2015, wherein one of 2 faces appear.
I am officially running for President of the United States.
It's helpful to reiterate Donald Trump's appointees to the Supreme Court, America's highest court, tasked with interpreting the United States Constitution, which is the law of the land. As the highest court, the United States Supreme Court has the power to revoke a federal law approved by Congress if they consider it unconstitutional, which shows that their interpretations rule over the rest of the government. His Supreme Court appointments were Amy Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, and Neil Gorsuch, who has some significant Catholic connections. Let's begin and finish with the fact that he was educated by Jesuits. Growing up, he attended Georgetown Preparatory School. The last general meeting of the Second Vatican Council marked the official close of the Second Vatican Council in December 1965, whereupon Pope John Paul VI made the following address. Men will realize that the Council devoted its attention not so much to divine truths, but rather, and principally, to the Church, her nature and composition. But the First Vatican Council gives us the spirit and nature of the whole movement. It was summoned by Pope Pius IX in June 1868, wherein Pope Pius IX announced the decrees of the Council. Number 13 states, "I acknowledge the Holy, Catholic, Apostolic and Roman Church, the mother and mistress of all the churches." Decree number 6 states, "I embrace and accept the whole, and every part of what was defined and declared by the Holy Council of Trent." The problem is, the Council of Trent, and its sweeping reforms not only laid down dogma clarifying nearly all doctrines contested by Protestants, but was a key part of the Catholic Counter-Reformation. It was the whole framework for opposing Protestantism. Perceived heresies were routinely crushed, often ruthlessly. One of the earliest movements crushed by Catholicism was the Paulicians, who advocated a return to the simplicity of early Christianity. Because they rejected the sacraments of the Church, Paulicians were eventually stoned to death, burned at the stake, or exiled. The existence and founding purpose of the Jesuits is in the spirit of what is formally called the Counter-Reformation, and has always been active in the highest institutions, with trillions in endowment cash. In the history of Christianity, the Counter-Reformation records that institutional inquisitions were established in Portugal in 1540, which is pretty curious because 1540 is the year that the Jesuits were founded, in Portugal. During the ages where there was no formal education for the common man, these mystics diligently sought out the understanding of dark scriptures, arriving at understandings learned enough to historically, geographically, archaeologically, scientifically, deceive the entire world, with little opposition.
The university was the darling, the spoiled child of the papacy and empire, of king and municipality alike. Privileges were showered on the proud institutions in a continuous golden stream, privileges that had no counterpart, then, before, or since. The Church was directly involved in the development of the universities, which was a key element in manipulating the Protestants' understanding of biblical history with sweeping deceptions. The cultural impact of their curriculum cannot be overstated, as this phenomenon was the mechanism that propped up one of their grandest deceptions.
The thought of America's colonization having anything whatsoever to do with Protestants was repulsive to them. Consequently, they devised a most ambitious scheme to infiltrate the United States government. The invoking of biblical Jews they correctly perceived would make Protestants bow down in reverence and invite them into their government. It was inevitable, a tremendous geographical hoax had to be perpetrated. The solution was to establish a modern-day Israel, with a Palestinian counterpart.
Created in the first half of the 20th century by Father B. Jarrett, and Jesuit Father Arthur Day, the Catholic Guild of Israel has received very little attention from historians. Nevertheless, this initiative received the blessings of Benedict XV and Pius XI. The Guild was tirelessly involved in publishing booklets and articles. and presenting sermons and lectures at churches, Catholic conferences, and meetings. The objective of these publications and presentations was to impress upon the world, in particular Protestants, the importance of accepting the deceitful Jesuit-devised doctrine known as Zionism. A guild pamphlet addressed to children urged that, there is something very precious and holy about the Jews. They reasoned that the securing of Hans Herzl, himself a convert to Catholicism, dubbed a Jew by converting to Judaism, with his very distinguished name, probably given to him by the Jesuits themselves, was thus a much-needed propaganda coup for the Guild. Propaganda coup aside, Hans Herzl wasn't the father of Zionism. That title belongs to his father Theodor Herzl, who traveled to the Vatican in January 1904 to plead his case to Pope Pius X. However, as this essay observes, he could never explain his Zionist conception. This is where we are told of inexplicable dreams. However, the truth is that this deception requires significant study and manipulation of the Bible. Thus, if Hans wasn't a Jesuit himself, which is likely the case, then he was heavily influenced by them. Not much different than his son Hans Herzl, whose mentor was the selfsame Jesuit father Arthur Day. Hans Herzl, a Catholic ascet, who continued to maintain the belief that the Catholic Church should hold the mandate for the Holy Land, and that the Jewish nation would be best served by affiliating with the Papal State, with the synagogue becoming a constituent member of the World Church, with the Pope as sovereign of dispersed Jewry, whereby the Pope would be the surest guarantor of Jewish human rights. What an distinct privilege! My guess is that the Catholic Church agreed with every single one of his sentiments. But what are the chances that these longings have anything to do with the intimate role that the Catholic Church itself played in the very conception and normalization of Zionism? For if Zionism, which is defined by a staunch insistence on a holy land for them which say they are Jews, and are not, but do lie, was genuinely what God declares, how could he be incapable of plainly identifying any such God-given ancient biblical right in the Bible? Despite this glaring omission of evidence, the world was swamped with prolific propaganda campaigns powered by Catholic printing presses. The catalyst for massive generational upheaval in Western Asia require no explanation. However, these most fundamental questions were quickly dismissed as being the seeds of anti-Semitism, because dutifully discovered in the Jesuit-fabricated Holy Land. At the same time it was being announced to the world, biblical scrolls were miraculously found in Western Asia. They were unveiled to the world during the Passover Easter season, enhancing their place in the public imagination, but primarily amongst Protestants. Ruins and artifacts from past civilizations found in Western Asia were indelibly attributed to biblical history. Planting, obfuscating, and fabricating biblical archaeology was not a problem for the Jesuits, neither were funds. The first ancient manuscripts were discovered by Solomon Schechter in 1896. They were discovered tucked away in the attic of a synagogue. A string of prestigious academic appointments soon followed. Fragments of the text he discovered were among the Dead Sea Scroll discovery, the discovery mentioned earlier, found laying in a cave by goat farmers, confirmed his very own thesis, and his own miraculous discovery, that the medieval copies he had discovered were of ancient origin. Solomon Schechter, a man who himself called the Jesuit-conceived Holy Land not ancient Israel, but Catholic Israel. I wonder if he had a point there. As it happens, many of these conspirators don't fail to pay homage to the Catholic Church. Despite the ability of the Jesuits to infiltrate virtually any international diplomatic affair, it was in the eagerness to conjure up what was to be perceived as the one and only ancient biblical Israel that a curious proposal was made. The Uganda scheme was a 1903 proposal ostensibly made by a British politician Joseph Chamberlain, whose dedication wasn't the interpretation of biblical eschatology, but more along the lines of a salesman, to create a Jewish homeland in a portion of British East Africa. It was presented at the 6th World Zionist Congress in Basel by Theodor Herzl himself, the founder of the modern Zionist movement, who was incapable of plainly explaining how we arrived at such an idea.
Now's a good time to mention Chaim Azriel Weizmann, the Zionist leader who served as president of the Zionist organization and later as the first president of Israel. Weizmann was not only instrumental in obtaining the Balfour Declaration of 1917 and convincing the United States government to recognize the newly formed State of Israel in 1948, but he completed his studies at the University of Freiburg. The Jesuits, which contributed to a large extent to the advancement and prosperity of the city of Freiburg, established the College of St. Michael in 1582, the theological faculty of which formed the basis of the University of Freiburg. From 1921 onward, Chaim Azriel Weizmann, the Jesuit-trained Zionist leader who served as president of the Zionist organization and later as the first president of Israel, traveled the world tirelessly, preaching Zionist ideology and appealing for funds at mass rallies.
The Sykes-Picot Agreement, rightly called a secret agreement, created during World War I between Great Britain and France, with the assent of Imperial Russia, so Russia was complicit, for the dismemberment of the Ottoman Empire, as opposed to ancient biblical lands, as this was the intention behind carving up the region. The agreement led to the division of regions inhabited by Oriental people, namely the Turks, who dwell in Asia, not ancient biblical Holy Land, as this was the scheme. In the midst of World War I, the question arose of what would happen to the Ottoman territories. Well, the Jesuits had an idea already in motion. The agreement led to the division of, but more accurately a geographic replica/hoax of, Turkish-held regions becoming biblical regions. Iraq, which after World War I, passed from the failing Ottoman Empire to British control, with the Kingdom of Iraq itself, established under the British Mandate in 1932, was to become the biblical Mesopotamia. Northern Africa, the biblical Egypt. Africa, a continent that for a long time has been, and still is, the subject of dispute, as many historians have not been able to come to an agreement on how the continent got its name. Right beside the much-famed Egypt, is a place named Libya, a place likewise never mentioned in the Bible, because it was created. That's where Egypt was designated to be, in close proximity to Catholic Israel. What was to become ancient biblical Palestine, because of the holy places manufactured, would be under an international regime, aka Catholic Israel. Perhaps equally telling, and likely just a secret, was the 1920 Conference of San Remo, in Italy, whose capital is Rome, Vatican City, where Pope Benedict XV was involved in developing the church administration to deal with the new international system that had emerged.
For Leo XIII had previously agreed to the participation of Catholics in politics, effectively closing the gap between Catholic Israel's 19th century conception, and carrying the insidious delusion into the 20th century.
As part of the preliminary diplomatic negotiations leading to the Balfour Declaration, Pope Benedict XV gave his support to a Zionist homeland in the old Ottoman Empire, to Zionist diplomat Nahum Sokolow on 4 May 1917, that is to say, Sokolow secured the support of Pope Benedict XV. Thus it is, that the conference approved the final framework of a peace treaty with Turkish-controlled regions of the Ottoman Empire. It abolished the Ottoman Empire, obliged Turkey to renounce all rights. The printing press itself was invented around 1440, by Johannes Gutenberg, which started the printing revolution. Johannes Gutenberg was the fellow who published the Gutenberg Bible, the earliest major book printed in Europe. Sources are essentially silent pertaining to his religious affiliation. However, his Bible was published in Latin Vulgate, the traditional language not of Protestants, as all Protestant Bible translations from 1600 to 1900, notably including the Luther Bible and the King James Version, are translated using Erasmus Greek. For Latin Vulgate is the traditional language of the Roman Catholic Church.